Welcome, everyone. We just got finished with our episode with Amrit Singh, Toronto-based acupuncturist. We hope you can all take a listen. This is a really fun episode. We talk about music. We talk about South Asian culture. Of course, there's these beauty standards, and we just had a really fun time. So
yeah, we talk about boys and Britney Spears and working at record shops. Literally my dreams.
uh-huh. But one thing that we were just kind of chatting about before we hit record was how our guests are finding a lot of meaning through this podcast. And it's been really refreshing for the both of us.
Yeah, I mean, like they get it. I think like when you and I started this, we're like, okay, these are questions we have, and we're just going to do this for fun. We're not sure if people are going to understand it. And I think you and I, we just had this like very broad concept or idea, right? But so far, every guest that we've had are like, oh my gosh, these are like things I like they're, I haven't thought about in a long time, or I haven't looked at it this way. So I hope like listeners are also feeling that. Like I've gotten some messages from some listeners too. And if you're listening and you love this, please give us a rating, write a review so that and share it with people. So yeah, the conversation has been so good. I mean, I've been learning so much.
Same. So what are some things that like really resonated with you that Amrit shared with us?
Let's see, so many different things. Like I mean, I'm thinking back and forth of like what she shared, but then also what I've been going through in the last week or so since our last episode. What I found really interesting that she talked about, and a lot of the questions that we asked her, is these protective mechanisms of beauty.
Yeah.
Like she was protected in so many ways, right? Like one example she said was her mom. Her mom, they grew up in South Asian Punjabi culture, and colorism is a big thing. And looking close to being white is a big thing, right? Light color eyes, light color skin, more so than like your body shape or your physical beauty. As long as you have white skin, all good, right?
Right.
But her mom never told her that. So it's something that she learned like in her 20s. And so by then she said she was already like this adult. So it had less of an impact on her. And like, I actually was wondering with you, because you're in Hawaii and you're a mixed race. Did you grow up thinking that, or like that? I can talk about Asian culture too, because you see colorism and whiteness in Asian culture too. But is that something you grew up as somebody mixed race?
Yeah, I think there was like a lot of different messages present for me. So my grandmother from China is very traditionally beautiful, very fair-skinned. She's really tall, she's really thin, she was a ballerina, she always took care of herself. So everyone looked to her as being this like very like exquisite beauty from China. But then my mother, who was born and raised in Hawaii, is very, very dark. And she was out in the sun a lot. She was a skater. And so she had such a different aesthetic. And I remember like she was teased a lot by her own family for that appearance. And I think I did at a young age associate like her really dark pigment with not being what was desired, like next to my grandma. So I already kind of had that understanding. Whether or not I can remember them actually saying like, you're so dark, you're too dark, I just like knew that I saw that difference. And then
but it's Hawaii. Like the sun's everywhere.
Okay, so that was like my family. But then going to school and in high school, definitely, and I'm sure probably like in the contemporary culture at the time, like we loved tanning and having tans. And I don't know if it was like, I think it was like within the US too, in the early 2000s and late 90s, like tans, I felt like we're in tanning beds, we're in bleaching your hair, lightening your hair, getting a tan. Like that was a big trend, at least in Hawaii. And I thought for some reason it may have also been outside of Hawaii, but
no, it was.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that so I had that messaging too. So I always felt like I would just go between the two, because I had friends, most of my like very close friends are actually naturally more fair skinned. So I have those friends that had that look, and I always found them beautiful. And then I also had like the other part of Hawaiian culture of like wanting a tan and like wearing this product called Maui Babe, which is basically a tanning lotion.
Uh-huh.
And then I also was part of like a Filipino group of friends. And so they kind of like took advantage of that trend and really like brought out their natural skin's ability to pigment
Uh-huh.
richly. So anywho, I was kind of like, I guess being biracial and multicultural, I could kind of come and go between those two ideas of
Yeah.
skin. Yeah. But what about for yourself?
Um, about tanning or well, the way I was thinking is for Asians, we're raised to think, yeah, the closer you look to white, the prettier you are, the more beautiful you are. So mixed race Asians, like Asian and white, is considered prettier, right? More beautiful. And so I think it, but then at the same time, like you're also not accepted because you're not full Asian. So it's this weird thing. It's like you're beautiful because you have white features, and but you're not Asian enough. It's like you have to kind of prove your Asianness some other way. Like, do you speak the language or something? And so I think, yeah, I have mixed race cousins, and even growing up with mixed race Asians, it's like it was always interesting to see like how they could it was like they could go back and forth between different cultures, but if you looked like more than one race, you couldn't have that. And to me, that looked like such a huge privilege. Like you
Mm,
can choose when to be white and you can choose when to
mm-hmm,
be Asian.
mm-hmm.
And I can't do that. Right.
Right.
Uh yeah, I mean, tanning 2000 in the year 2000, I was when I when I get tan, I get dark, right? And then my hair gets light. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I would go on vacation all the time in my 20s because I'm making a ton of money, which is so stupid. A 19-year-old should not be making that much money. But people thought I was mixed race. People thought I was Black and Asian. And at that time, Black and Asian was like considered really beautiful in New York.
Yes. Yep.
Right. And so I
Mm-hmm.
definitely got into a lot of clubs because they thought I was Black and Asian and my skin was dark. And so, and then I guess my features, like I have bigger lips that Asians don't have these
Mm-hmm.
lips. And so that was always interesting. And it's only looking back on it. And it was like, oh, that's how it, that in itself was some kind of weird privilege too, just getting access to like clubs and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But when I've traveled through Asia, and that was I think the first time when I was traveling through Southeast Asia was the first time I realized what colorism really was in terms of whiteness, because everything had white moisturizers,
Yeah.
white, yeah,
Bleaching, brightening,
yeah,
lightening.
soap, white,
Yeah.
whitening soap. And I would look for, I didn't want that because I wanted the tan. And I remember I was in Vietnam, and like I was on the beach and these girls were like, "Oh, you can't get tan. Like, don't get tan. Like, you just stay out of the beach." And I'm like, "What? I don't like, why not?" Like,
Mm-hmm.
and they were local girls and they were like, "No, no, 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 we can't get tan." And so it was really interesting to see, because even in my like I would never be that fair skin anyways. Like my
Right.
natural skin is not that fair.
Right. Like this is probably the fairest you get, right?
Yeah,
Like
and I
your
got like a
current.
bright light on. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is yeah. Yeah. And to me, that fair skin, I don't know, when I look at Asian beauty and it's like white skin, um, it doesn't look attractive to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in a Black and brown culture. So I think seeing beauty that way was very different. And then I got into white culture, like with more white people later in my life. So it was a real culture shock to be like, wait, what? Like being skinny is that's what's beautiful. And Amrit talks about that too in her
Right.
story
Well, the
about being South
interesting,
Asian.
yeah, sorry. The interesting thing about like being really thin and also being very fair is it actually is a lack of chi. So, like I think about when you don't have like, like some rosiness to your cheeks or like just good blood flow to the face and you're very pale. And then same thing like with your body, if it's, I mean, I know there are a lot of people who are naturally thin, and that's another thing that I can't speak on because I know they have their own struggles and issues there. But for
Mhm.
the other standards that are encouraging women who aren't naturally thin to then become thin, I mean, it's asking them to strip of their like postnatal chi
Mhm.
and to deprive themselves of that transformation of chi from nutrition via food.
Mhm.
So I think when you look at it that way, like that is interesting. And then when you go back to these ancient civilizations throughout history, and like you go back to when there may have been empresses or female rulers, they all had a very strong stature and build, because they had to have that place of power. They needed more chi, you know. Um, so
Ooh,
yeah, I'm just kind
you
of
said something
thinking.
really interesting about chi and power because I'm reading this
Mm-hmm,
book on beauty, and they said for the longest time in every culture, and Amrit talks about this too, like the ideal body type was much more voluptuous. I don't know if
right.
Asian culture was like that too, but I mean, I guess yeah. When I look at old um, photos of art, I guess it is a
Mm-hmm,
bigger body, right?
yeah.
And so I was reading this book on the history of beauty, and they talk about body, and they were saying that it wasn't until like the Industrial Revolution, at least in the States, I guess maybe Europe too, but maybe I think it was like all over the world. Industrial Revolution happened, and um, women were being more put into the homes, and men were more going to work, right? And so
Mm-hmm,
that's when the idea of body shape changed to having women be thin, very thin, because it was a sign of class. Like you're rich enough, so two people don't have to work in the farm or whatever.
right.
And it was a power thing. Like I keep my wife very thin, so she's too weak to work. So she
Mm-hmm,
stays at home. And that's
mm-hmm.
how this idea of like a thin body came to be like this thing of beauty. And when you look at class and beauty and body, like it's sort of the same thing. Like who is
Yes,
able to be very skinny? It's like if you
right.
have a lot of money, right?
No, exactly. If you have the trainer, the dietitian, nutritionist, whatever, that goes into having a body like that.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
thought it was so interesting because it was like a power trip. Like, I'm going to keep my wife super weak so she can't work
Hmm.
and keep her weak and skinny at home.
Right. I mean, that's a kind of an extension of bound feet too, from my culture.
Ah,
And actually, I'm trying to think how many greats, because my grandma did come from a really wealthy family in China. And
uh-huh.
so maybe her great grandmother or her grandmother had bound feet. I have photos of her actually. And we
Can you
we
talk
have
more a
one of
little
her
bit about
shoes.
bound feet for people who don't know?
Yes, so I wish I knew the exact like timeline that this was a trend,
Or like
but
what is it?
yeah, so it's when you break a woman's toes and like tarsals, and you fold it at the arch and you wrap it, and then it heals like that. So it kind of, if for those watching the YouTube of it, it's like if you make a palm with your hand, so it kind of makes your foot half or at least one third smaller, and you actually can't even walk anymore. Really, it's very hard to walk. And then you have these teeny pointed shoes that are a little bit elevated. We have, my family is at my parents' house, so you can almost, it's very hard to walk, it's very painful to walk, and you're meant to just be like seated and dainty. And you have like my grandma's family, they had a lot of staff
Mhm.
and what she called servants, and they would tend to the children and the cooking and the cleaning. And so her grandmother or great grandmother could just sit there in her wealth with her small bound feet, And then there's also this idea, like the sexism part of your wife staying at home and never being able to run away and needing to
Oh, I
be
didn't know
picked
that.
up to like go to certain places or carried. And yeah, so there's that like narrative of it too. So obviously that's like barbaric and extreme, but this, like what the book was talking about, it kind of just reminded me of the same sentiment towards women.
I'm thinking now about like bodybuilding too, like how muscular bodies on women are not seen as attractive. And I wonder
Yes,
if that plays into all of this too.
absolutely. I would feel that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think about this all the time because, like, I've got body issues and I look at Korean culture and I think it's, I think being Asian and having body issues, obviously having body issues with anybody is very difficult, but I don't think we talk about it enough in terms of East Asian culture
Mm-hmm.
of body issues. And I, how it plays out, I've been thinking the last couple weeks, it's like, if you're thin, people just assume you're thin because you're Asian.
Right.
And I've never been thin. The times I've been thin is because I work my ass off to be that thin. And
Mm-hmm.
so it would always make me mad that people would like, oh, well, you're just Asian. I'm like, no, I haven't eaten carbs in like months and I'm hungry. Right. And then I think about like Korean culture, what we see in the Korean media, like K-pop and all that, like the super thin bodies, right? But when you look
Mm-hmm.
at Korean in terms of like the geography and like
Mm-hmm.
we're mountain people.
Right.
Like we're I
And
don't think
strong boned.
strong bone, right?
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be this thin, I don't think. It's like you're supposed to have like the lower body is supposed to be really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've always had a butt and like that's always been a thing. Oh, you got a big butt, you got a big butt, right? And to me it's like, well, yeah, like I come from mountain people. Of course I would have big, how
Right.
are we supposed to climb up these damn mountains?
Right.
And so it's I just been thinking about that. I'm like, this shouldn't even be my issue, right? Like my body
Mm-hmm.
issues is not my issue.
Yeah. No, that's true too. It is really interesting. I mean, growing up with mostly Asian people around me and a lot of them being pure Asian, I always felt like I was disadvantaged being half white in that I was like, oh, I have to work this much harder to maintain like a small frame to keep with,
Oh,
yeah, with like my pure Asian friends' size. But for all I know, like you, and like what some French women will say, they'll be like, no, we don't. That book about like French people being thin, my girlfriend from Paris is like, no, we starve ourselves. I'm like, oh, I guess. She's like, that book is BS. We are starved. Um,
I
but
remember there was this
yeah.
picture of this girl that we used to hang out with in my 20s, and she kind of disappeared. And then she came back, and I saw a picture of her. And I remember this moment. She was so thin. I was like, holy crap. Like, she lost a lot of weight. And my friend was like, yeah, because like she's a drug addict now. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah,
That's
there's
another
that.
way to stay thin. Drugs
Exactly.
will keep you thin.
Oh my gosh. So what other things have like, I mean, we just got off of the episode with Emirates, but what are some other things that you're reflecting on, either just since our last episode and just coming up fresh off of speaking with Emirates?
So I don't know if I talked about this in Jamie's episode, but like I think I did about how my skin freaked out because I used the expired foundation and don't use
No.
oh yeah, so my skin totally freaked out because I used a foundation that was expired. And I had even asked Instagram people, like, can I use this? Like, actually, I didn't even know it. I didn't even know foundation could expire. Like, I just,
Mm-hmm.
I bought it a couple years ago before COVID because I was in town where there's no sales tax, and I just like bought all the makeup. And then when I opened it up, I'm like, this texture is really weird. And so I asked Instagram and they're like, don't use it. And I'm like, I'm going to still use it anyways. Because I come from a, immigrant working class family. You don't throw away things, especially you don't throw
Right.
away new things.
Right.
New expensive things, right? And so I wore it, then kept wearing it and saw my face freak out. And I was like, huh, that's weird. Got worse, kept wearing it, got worse. It took me like months to make that connection that like, oh, it's this. This is expired. It has bacteria. I'm literally just putting bacteria in my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, and Amrit talks about that with like her cystic acne. And both of you talked about like, I'm still surprised that both of you don't have this pressure to look a certain way being in the beauty wellness industry.
Well, I think, but didn't she kind of say she does?
She does with the acne. I
Oh,
think
that's
the
right.
one
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah. But everything else, like she's pretty good about, right? But anyway, so I I was like, okay, I need to do this. So I bought a bunch of products and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try the Korean skincare thing, the 10 steps, right? Do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've had this hesitation towards that for so many years. I mean, this thing like came out like years ago.
Yeah.
This was a thing, right? Now it's like I'm way behind the trend. And I was so hesitant about it because a lot of the moisturizers and things that I grew up with had whitening things, and I didn't want that. And so I thought these Korean skincare stuff would have whitening things. And so, but now Korean products have evolved and there are some whitening stuff, but there are a lot of that aren't. And so I bought I researched so much. And I also saw this as like an act of like doing something really nice for myself and then making it a beauty ritual. And then I was very particular with the things that I bought. I bought a lot of things that use Korean medicine, like Chinese medicine, herbs that are into it. And then I also knew my skin, like what was happening in my skin, because acupuncturists, we have to take chemistry classes before we start, most of us, not all. So I knew what was happening in terms of my pH balances and how to like even that out. And it's been like 3 weeks and my skin is freaking amazing. It cleared up. I still have a little bit going on, but it is incredible. And I was thinking like, why did I not do this like before? Because I grew up using American products for white skin, which was very drying. And it's all about like drying your skin, exfoliating real hard, where Korean skincare is very much like replenish, replenish, moisturize,
rebalance.
Yeah. Like put on more moisturizer and then like seep that moisturizer into the deeper layers of the skin, right? And so I was like, why did I not do the thing that comes from my culture a long time ago? And like it's such a beautiful ritual that I do every single night, because my normal ritual is the 4-hour bath, and I can't take a 4-hour bath every day. So this has been like this thing, and it's
the day to day.
Yeah. And it's so decadent and luxurious because I picked really beautiful products. And it's something that I don't tend to spend money on things for myself. I spend money on like experiences. And so to that, it's just nice. I feel really good at night when I get to do this and in the morning. And it's just like, it made me realize like, I want to do more nice things for myself.
I think this is a good year to do it for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what people do when they're in a relationship though. That's what I was thinking yesterday. It's like you have all this on, right? And then like, I would be like, no, we can't have sex. We can't have sex. Like it's all don't touch. You guys. So I wonder what people in relationships do. Like, when do you have sex? Because there's no way I'm gonna have sex and then like have sweat and then have to do this all over again.
Oh my gosh, Tamsin, it's so funny. I would, in Hawaii, we have like, we talk about race so casually here because there's just so many, or at least Asian ethnicity so casually here. So we'll say, like, my friends and I will be like, unless you look like a Korean grandma, you didn't put enough moisturizer on.
Oh
Like,
my
in other
God.
words, we want to get like really, really shiny, super, super heavy moisturized faces. And in Hawaii, growing up, like, that's what we would see. We would see these, they're probably not that old anymore, but growing up, I thought these like older Korean women with like these very shiny, bright, luminescent complexions. And so that was our standard for how we knew how well we were being moisturized, is we would just be like, how, like, think of that Korean grandma we saw. Did I get that? Okay, no, I need to put one more layer.
You need the scale.
Exactly. That was our scale. That was our moisturizing scale, was like Korean grandma.
Oh my God. My Korean grandma had I think that was my hesitation too, because she's the one that was very much about beauty in a lot of ways. Skincare, jewelry, the clothes she wore, hair.
Mhm.
And my grandma wasn't a nice grandma to me. And
Yeah.
so that, I think I associated that with her.
You're right.
And my mom is the complete opposite. Like,
Mhm.
she grew up in a wealthy family, but she just didn't put a lot of care into what she looked like. Even though I thought she was beautiful growing up, I still think she was
Mhm.
beautiful.
Mhm.
But she doesn't. And so I grew up thinking, like, I was lost and confused. Like, I didn't know how to put on makeup. I didn't know how to wash my face. I honestly feel like I just learned how to wash my face like a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
I was
Yeah,
like,
double cleanse.
double cleanse, but
Oil
then
and
like
then foam.
fingertips, like
Mhm.
I'm this old and now I know how to wash my face. Um, but anyways, I bought my mom for Mother's Day coming up, like one of these products, the one with the Korean medicine that's really luxurious. And
Mhm.
she and her like clients would give her all these gifts all the time and she would never use it and she would just give it
Right.
to me. And so I feel like this is such a beautiful ritual for me and I want to share this with her. So I don't know if she's going to use it or not, but
That's really beautiful.
yeah. What have you
Yeah.
been up to? Like what sort of reflections have you been going through since our last chat?
Mhm. I had a huge moment this past week. So for our listeners here, I just love sweets. Oh, I talked about chocolate, I think, in one of our episodes. I just love them. And I had a moment. Sometimes I'll go overboard and I'll just like, it's really difficult for me to stop eating them.
Mm.
And this past week, I had that similar moment, but then I had this revelation where I think I had like, I love to have a combination of sweets in different textures and different forms, whether it's like hot or cold or like squishy or
Oh wow.
hard. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I went through that whole like combination of it all. And then normally when that happens, I just like physically don't feel well. I just start to feel like tired and kind of foggy brained. And I also like regret it. I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. Like I wish I had not done that. But then this past week, I had this like huge moment where I was like, I can decide how I feel. Like, yes, of course, there's a biochemical component that I can't deny what happens with sugar and insulin and all that process. But I also was like, I can decide how I feel mentally and emotionally about this. And I
Mm.
chose happiness. And I was like, I'm going to feel happy. And I was like, I'm going to smile. I'm going to like look back on that and like be really happy about it. I'm going to celebrate all the yummy things I had. And I'm just going to be really happy. And it completely changed. It just like, I've never done that in my whole life ever. And I've had eating problems since age 9 was the first time I can really remember having disordered eating. But, so it's never ceased. And I was like, I've never done that in my whole life. And it was so incredible, and it changed the biochemistry, because of course it's like epigenetics, right? It's like your thoughts, emotions, and environment change your DNA. So in that moment, I chose happiness, and I didn't have the same adverse physical effects that I would have normally when I've chosen like negativity and like negative self-talk, and I feel like crap physically. Because I chose happiness, I actually felt fine. And
It
I'm not
sounds,
gonna,
yeah.
yeah,
No,
I'm
no,
not
go.
gonna keep doing that. Like, I'm not gonna like purposely be like, I'm gonna, I'm gonna like go full out on like dessert and then I'm gonna be happy. Like, I'm not gonna keep doing that because I understand, like, at some point, I mean, you can't run away from the fact that we're a body. But it was just like a really like pivotal, transformative experience for me, and it felt like really holy. So I'm going to continue to hold that memory really close to myself. And yeah,
I
so that
love
was
that for
huge.
you.
It was
You know
huge.
what it sounds like? It sounds like you just allowed yourself to not feel shame.
Yeah, I think that's 100% what that was.
And when you do that, it's like the most incredible feeling.
Mm-hmm. And I've never really felt that before. I've always told myself like not to feel a
Yeah.
certain way and just be like, it's okay, Paige, it's okay. But I've been like, yeah, but I feel like crap. But this time I was like, no, I'm happy. And then I like let that carry me, and then it kept supporting me.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
huge.
it's
'Cause I think
huge.
that's like a big obstacle to not feel shame. We have so much self shame around
Mm-hmm.
everything we do. And
Yeah,
like Amrit talks about that at the end of our episode. Her legacy is that she wants people to not talk about themselves the way that they do. Like we would never say these things to the people that we love, but we say it to
right,
ourselves.
right.
And like the things that we say to ourselves are just horrible. And like
Mm-hmm.
and it's so normal too. It's like we don't even
Mm-hmm.
realize we say that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Yeah, so I don't know. I love this that we're doing together, Tamsin, and I hope all of the listeners out there are feeling, equally excited about what we're sharing and what our guests are sharing. So thank you everyone for your support. And again, you can like us, rate us, review us, and we're just going to continue to have these really fun, juicy conversations.
Bye.
Bye.